Now that we've set up ESLint, GitHub, dependencies, the entire starting project structure, we are ready to start coding out our components. Let's start from the top to the bottom with our navigation bar. So let's simply start our application by running npm start and go to components, navbar. Inside of our navbar, we're going to use a few things from Material UI. So let's import them straight away. Import app bar, also icon button, also toolbar, also drawer. We need a button, we need an avatar, and that's going to be it from now. All of this is coming from add MUI material. Great. We're also going to need a few icons, some of which we're going to use right away, some of which we're going to use later. But let's go ahead and import them. We're going to say import, that's going to be menu, that's going to be account circle, as well as the brightness. That's going to be brightness 4, as well as the brightness 7. And these icons are coming from add MUI icons material. Finally, we've already mentioned that we have to use a link. So let's do import link, and that's going to be coming from react-router-dom. That's going to allow us to switch between different pages. I think that's going to be it for now, so let's see what we can do to get started. First, we're not going to have this as a div. We're going to create an empty React fragment. It looks something like this. Then inside of it, we're going to have the app bar. So let's create the app bar component. And it's not going to be a self-closing component, so we can expand it. And it's going to have a position equal to fixed. Inside of there, we're going to have a toolbar. So let's use a toolbar component. That toolbar is going to have a class name. So let's go ahead and implement classes straight away. Class name is going to be classes.toolbar. Now think about it. We created the classes and the styles for the app.jsx, but now we need to repeat the process for the navigation bar. So let's go ahead and create a new file inside of the navbar, which is going to be called styles.js. And as I've told you, the process is always going to be the same. We create a styles file in the corresponding folder, and then you can simply copy everything else being simply this: export default, make styles, and then in here we can write styles. And then in every component, the procedure is the same. Import something known as use styles from /styles, and then finally we call it as a hook. Const classes is equal to use styles, and that's it. Then we have access to all of the classes that we create right here. Our toolbar class is going to have a height, and that height is going to be equal to 80 pixels. We're also going to give it a display equal to flex, as well as the justify content equal to space dash between. Finally, we're going to give it a margin left equal to 224 pixels. For now, that's going to be good. Of course, all of these styles have to be in some sort of an object that we called a toolbar. So let's say toolbar is equal to an object, and then we can bring those above inside of there. Great. Our toolbar is now done. It's not going to be a self-closing component, so let's go ahead and expand it right here. Inside of our toolbar, we're going to have a few different things depending on if we're on mobile or on desktop devices. Let me show you what I mean. Just for reference, whenever we're building a certain feature, you can always go to filmpire.netlify.app, and then in there, you'll be able to see what we're currently building. Right now, we're building this blue navigation bar at the top that has the theme changing capabilities, the search bar, as well as the My Movies if we're logged in. But now I'm going to go to inspect, and I'm simply going to clear the storage to log us out. Now, if we get logged out, we should simply show login. Also, check it out. This looks a bit different on mobile devices. we no longer have the search if we are on a specific movie page, but if we're not, we have this menu bar that's going to open up and everything is kind of centered and the login is on the right side while the search is below. So now we have to code out that navigation bar, how it is, to work on both desktop devices as well as on the mobile devices. So let's go ahead and continue our navbar creation process. Right now, we just have this nice blue navigation bar. Currently it's empty, but let's go ahead and code different things on mobile and different things on desktop devices. So inside of the toolbar, we want to show an icon button or a menu, but only if we're on mobile devices. So how can we know if we're currently on the mobile device? Well, what we can do is we can create a new special variable called isMobile. Const isMobile. The question is, how is React or JavaScript or anybody here going to know if we are on that specific device? What we can do is import something known as useMediaQuery, and that's coming from MUI Material UI React. We can call that as a hook here, useMediaQuery, and then inside of there, you can put a string. In string, you can write parentheses, max-width, and then colon 600 pixels. If something is larger than 600 pixels, then it's not going to be mobile. Otherwise, it will be. So this is a Material UI utility that's going to allow us to check for mobile devices. So inside of this toolbar, what we can do is we can go ahead and type curly braces is mobile. So if it is mobile, and that means then we want to show something. In parentheses, we want to show an icon button. Icon button with the menu icon inside of it, which is a self-closing tag. That icon button is going to have a few properties. So let's expand it and add them straight away. Color is going to be equal to a string that says inherit. Then we're going to have the edge, which is going to be set to start. If you don't know what some of these properties mean, simply hover over them. And for edge, for example, it says, if given, uses a negative margin to counteract the padding on the side. This is helpful for aligning the left or right side of the icon with the content above or below. Great. Again, I'm going to explain in detail why we're using specific properties, and I'm going to show you how you can research that on your own. But that's going to happen in just a moment. Let's finish this up. The icon button is also going to have inline styles that's going to say outline equal to a string of none. And finally, we also have to have some kind of an on click, which we're going to add later. So for now, we can just leave that on click as an empty object. Or rather than having it as an empty object, let's put an empty callback function inside of it. Finally, we're going to give it a class name, and the class name is going to be classes.menu button. Great. Let's go ahead and implement those classes. So if we go to styles, our menu button is going to be another class, which is an object. And then we're simply going to give it margin right is equal to, and now we're going to use a special measurement. That measurement is called theme. We get access to this special theme object, which contains special colors, background colors, text colors, as well as the specific measurements like paddings, margins, widths. Also contains mobile responsive capabilities. So let me show you how we can use it. Margin right is going to be set to theme.spacing at 2. That's a special Material UI function that you can call to get always the same spacing. Again, I misspelled it, so that's going to be margin right. And another great feature that the theme offers is something that looks like this. We can provide different classes depending on which device are we currently on. So put an array sign, type theme.breakpoints.up, and then in there a string of small. Finally, go outside of that array, put a colon and then an object. Now, whichever styles you write inside of here, they're going to only show up on devices that are higher than the small, meaning not mobile devices. So we want to hide this button on every device that is not a mobile device. I hope this made just a bit more sense. So on mobile devices, we're showing the menu button, but on desktop devices, we're setting the display to be none because this is going to trigger. Finally, let's add a theme for mobile device on toolbar as well. So we can again copy the same thing. This time, we only want to add a class on mobile devices. So we're going to say small down. In there, we want to set the margin left to be equal to 0 on mobile devices, and also flex wrap to be equal to wrap. Again, I'm going to explain in just a second why. Now, if we save that, we have our icon button, we have our toolbar. Let's go ahead and check it out in the browser. Now, as soon as we get back to our browser, we're greeted with this error. And right here, it says cannot read properties undefined reading down, basically saying that theme.breakpoints doesn't exist. And that makes sense. Let me explain why. To be able to use this theme, we have to first wrap our entire application with it. Similar situation, what we've done with the React router. So for Material UI to work, we have to do two different things. We have to import something known as create theme and also a theme provider. These things are coming from at Material UI, and then that's going to be material, and then finally /styles. Once you have these two, you can say const theme is equal to create theme, and then for now, we're simply going to pass in an empty object. Finally, we can use this theme provider in the same way we use the browser router to wrap our application with it. So now I'm going to wrap that, add a comma at the end, and there we go. This theme provider takes in a theme, which is equal to theme. Now we'll be able to use this theme all across our application. Now let's go back to our styles and reload the application and see if we still have an error. There we go, our error is fixed. To quickly explain why this error occurred, we can go to Material UI and simply search for theming. If you go to theming, you'll be able to see that we indeed need to have our theme provider to be able to use that theme object. Now, one more thing that might be important is if we get to the installation guide right here, is that we need to import the link to the Robota font. So let's go ahead and copy this, go back to our application, to the public folder, index.html, and then simply paste that link tag right inside of here. Great. Now, if we save that, we should be able to continue working on our navbar. We've created this toolbar, and let's check if our isMobile variable is working. If it is, we should only be able to see this menu button on mobile and not on desktop. So now I'm going to close all of these. And let's simply go to our localhost 3000 and reload. Now to look at the device in mobile view, you can simply right click and then click inspect, or a shorthand is Control-Shift-I. As soon as you do that, you should be able to see the Elements tab, and you can click Toggle Device Toolbar. Now you can take a look at how your websites look on mobile devices. You can check them on all different kinds of devices. Usually I just test on iPhone X. And there we go. Here is our menu button, which is right now not doing anything, but it's there. Now let's continue with other parts of our navigation bar. Now that we added the menu button, let's add the toggle dark and light mode. We're not going to make it work just yet, but we need to have it here for the navigation bar layout. So to implement it, just below this isMobile, we're going to have one more icon button. This icon button is going to have a color equal to inherit. It's also going to have something special called SX is equal to an object, and then in here you can provide some kind of Material UI styles. They make it a lot easier to add inline styles. In this case, we can simply say margin left ML is equal to 1 to simply give it a left margin. We're also going to give it an on click, but for now we're also going to just leave it as an empty callback function just like so, and then we're going to implement it later. Now we have to show an icon. So for now, I'm simply going to say brightness 7 and leave it as a self-closing tag. Now, if we save that and go back, you can see that we have the sun here. But how are we going to make it toggleable? How are we going to know if we're currently on light or dark mode? Well, for that, we're going to use a Material UI theme property. So just at the top, we can import something known as use theme. And let's import that from add MUI, that's going to be material, and then / styles. Finally, we can call that as a hook, const theme is equal to use theme. Great. Now just below, we can use that theme to figure out are we currently on dark or white mode. So instead of showing this icon, we can open a dynamic code block and then we can check for theme.palette.mode. If it is triple equal to dark, in that case, we want to show the brightness, and that's going to be brightness 7 icon. Else, we can simply show brightness 4 icon. Keep in mind we're using a ternary operation here. You have a specific Boolean equation here, something that's going to be true or false, and then if it ends up being truthy, you show this thing, otherwise we're going to show this thing. So right now, let's go back, and you can see that right now we have the moon here to change it to the dark mode. Later on, once we implement that, this is going to be toggleable, and it will indeed change. Now below that, we're going to add one more dynamic statement, and we're going to say if it is not mobile. So if we're not on mobile, then we want to render a search component. Right now, I'm just going to say search ... and then later on, we're going to display that component. Below that, we're going to show a div. And then inside of that div, we want to show different information if we're authenticated, if we're logged in, or if we're not. So what we can do is we can say if is not is authenticated. So let's write it like this. If not is authenticated, then we can use the ternary expression to show something, else we can show something else. Right now, we don't have access to this is authenticated variable, so let's create a dummy variable. Const is authenticated, and at the start, we can simply set it to be equal to true, and then later on, we can switch it to false. So if we're not authenticated, we want to show a button from Material UI, and that button is going to have a color like this. Color is equal to inherit. It's also going to have an on click, which we're going to implement soon enough. And finally, inside of there, we're simply going to say login. And then you can use the space sign. So that's going to be and NBSP, and then semicolon. That's going to be a space. We want to have a space between the login and the icon is just a self-closing account circle tag. There we go. This is going to be our button. So now let's save it. And then if we are authenticated, we're going to show same thing, a button, but our button is going to be just a bit different. This button is going to have a color equal to inherit. It's also going to be a special component. So a component is equal to link. So this button is going to link us to a specific page. With every link, we also have to have a to property. And in this case, we want to go to a dynamic string like this. So we have to do it like this, and then a template string. We want to go to / profile, and then / in here is going to be a specific ID. But right now we don't yet have the functionality for profiles, so I'm just going to leave it like this, ID. Finally, we're also going to have a class name, and the class name is going to be classes.link button. And then finally, we're going to have an on click. So right here, again, just an empty callback function just for now. And then finally, we want to make it just a bit different for mobile devices. So we're going to say if not is mobile, then display a string like this that simply says an empty React fragment that's going to say my movies. Again, we want to have that space tag inside of there, so my movies, and then we can close our tag. There we go. And then finally below that, we want to show the avatar, which is going to be the image of a specific logged in person. We want to give it some inline style, which is going to be width is set to 30, as well as the height is going to be set to 30 pixels. We also want to give it the alt tag, which is the alternative for people with screen readers. And that's going to be, let's just simply put it as profile now. And also we want to have a source, which is going to be the image. So we can say source. In here, for now, we can find some demo profile image. We can find a placeholder avatar image until we actually fetch real profile data. To do that, I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to search avatar placeholder image. We can go here and let's find something that looks like this. Right click and then copy image address. Now that we go back, we can simply paste it here as a string. There we go. With that, we're ending our button. And finally, we want to show one more thing. Our search is showing up before this is authenticated if we're on desktop devices. But now we want to copy this line 33 for me, and paste it below this div right here. We're gonna say if we are on mobile, then show the search last. Great. And that is going to be it for the app bar for now. Let's save it and take a look in the browser. And would you look at that? We have our menu bar. We can toggle the dark and light mode. We have our app, which actually works. You saw that it switched to profile. And then finally, we have our future search component. Now, if we go to our desktop device, you can see that this still looks great. Right now, it's kind of centered toward the right side because on the left side is where our sidebar is going to go. So now is the time that we implement the sidebar. And that is going to be the topic of the next lecture. So right now, we created the layout, not the functionality, just the layout for the navigation bar. Secondly, we're going to create the layout for the sidebar. We first want to be able to see something. And then once we have all of the components built out, we'll be able to quickly start moving toward the functionality. Before we move to the next lecture though, I just want to quickly go through Material UI documentation for the components we've used so far. I've promised you that. So to visit Material UI, you can go to mui.com and then go to Docs. Inside of here, on the right side, you're gonna see example project, templates, and so on. But let me quickly explain what Material UI is. They basically offer you a lot of pre-done components. It is a UI library. So for example, this card that you can see right there, this calendar on the right side, this music player, also something like this, like the profile card. It's all built using their components. And this is a nice representation. If I hover over it, this is the avatar. And that's exactly what we are using. This is going to be a typography. Again, icon, button, chip, stack. They created a lot of predefined components that we can use that are going to help us with our styling. For example, a good looking button right out of the box. We have some kind of text. We can change the inputs, alerts. We can click it. There are a lot of things that we can use. And to find more information about all of that, go to their docs, and then finally to components. In here, if you're interested about any of these components, for example, we use the app bar. So I'm going to search for app bar. And in here, you can see what it is, how to use it. You can see the code example. And that's what I want to teach you in this whole course. Not just to build a Filmpire, although let's be honest, it's a phenomenal app. I want to teach you how you can build something of your own, how you can build every single new application with the skills you're going to learn. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. You can go through this, take some time before the next lecture, browse through different components just so you have a good idea of which components exist and how you can use them. For example, see, login functionality, they have a complete example. They have the search implemented right here. Everything is right here. So if you're ever unsure of some components I'm using in my tutorials, definitely make sure to go to mui.com, docs, and then just search for them. For example, button. You have a lot of different buttons, text, contained, outlined, and there are a lot of properties that can be used on this button. So how can you know which properties can you use? It says disabled here, but we just found that. There's also href. There's also things like variant, elevation. How do you know what are all the properties that you can use on a specific element? That's what API reference is for. So if you search for button, the first thing is going to be the button, but there's also the button API. This is going to explain, or not explain, just rather list out all of specific properties that you can use on a specific element or a component. There we go. So I hope that Material UI is just a bit clearer to you right now. We are using it as the UIKit library, which is going to provide us some predefined component to make our styling or CSS life easier, while still allowing us to focus on functionality and flexibility. With that said, let's go to the next lecture where we're going to learn how to implement this sidebar right here. Great work so far. Let's keep it going.